Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Today I want to go through some of the slight differences in 9.8 comic books to look out for when you're buying. Because I think one of the big kind of noob mistakes to make is to think like, oh, this is a 9.8. It's got to be pretty much a perfect book. Like I probably don't even have to look at the pictures because, you know, they're professionally graded and 9.8 white pages, like it's got to be almost perfect. You don't want to assume that for 9.8 comics. You absolutely want to be aware of some of the defects and the differences because, yeah, human beings have graded these things. So you just have to expect some mistakes to be made, and you want to know those mistakes and be prepared and not, you know, be surprised and angry when they happen kind of thing. Yeah, another thing, it's been quite a long time since I made a video like this, probably about 2 years. I feel like I got a lot more experience since then, and I got a pretty good process of, you know, things to look out for to make sure you're buying like a clean 9.8. So 6 categories to get through. The first one is centering and the wrap. So we'll kind of talk about the centering and miswrapping in one. We'll use my Hulk 340s as well. Yeah, the only 9.8 I got 4 of. And they are kind of slightly different in some interesting ways, which is good for this video. But so this one has a bit of a miswrap where you get some of the pages kind of sticking out of the top, so the cover is kind of shifted a little down, the pages shifted a little up, which actually is a really interesting, you don't see that kind of miswrap very often. A lot of times it's like, you know, the pages are sticking out the side, which I would say is more of a centering issue. But miswraps, you know, this one actually, as far as the wrap, is pretty good. You get, yeah, a little bit of the front cover along the back cover near the bottom. So it's maybe not perfectly parallel. So this one kind of has an interesting center and a wrap. This one, though, a good example of kind of a miswrap that kind of annoys me on a book like this. So you notice, like McFarlane and Wycheck, they sign along the spine on this one. So this one's got where the front cover curls around to the back cover, a kind of miswrap that I don't really like especially when there's like some signatures along the spine. Personally, I would like a little bit of a miswrap where the back cover miswraps toward the front. And actually that's my other 2 Hulk 340s are similar to that, where they just got like a perfect little line of the back cover miswrapping to the front. But then you really see the signatures really well because they're not being miswrapped the other way. So on a book like this, it really works out. I like this kind of miswrap too when the back cover is white, which, you know, most like late 70s, early 80s books have a white back cover. And if it's miswrapped and you just got kind of a little parallel line of white down this side, for me, I don't mind that at all. And then you kind of get to see the full cover. I'd rather have that than, you know, the front cover miswrapping toward the back, and then maybe like, you know, the price is cut off half, and the signatures might be cut off. For me, that's more of an annoyance than the other kind of miswrap. So, yeah, just something to be aware of. Like, these are 9.8 comic books. These miswraps and centerings are manufacturing defects. So, you know, a lot of times you'll see like a 9.4 that has better centering and a better wrap than a 9.8, but, you know, it's also got a couple spine ticks and probably deserves to be a 9.4. But so absolutely, you know, just something to look out for in 9.8 comics. The centering and the wrap's really important. Second thing is colors. And probably my best colored Hulk 340 is the one that is kind of miswrapped. Yeah, pretty solid colors on this Hulk 340. I actually probably don't have like a 10 out of a 10 color Hulk 340. I would say this is probably an 8 out of a 10. I've saw a few Hulk 340s over the years where they got those vivid colors, and, you know, in a 9.8 that just looks really awesome. Yeah, so colors, again, a manufacturing defect. You'll see like a 9.2 or a 9.4 with better colors than a 9.8 occasionally. So you just want to be aware of that. And yeah, ideally, like, you know, you want to find a 9.8 for a really good price with great colors and great centering. But, you know, sometimes that can't happen, and but it's still something to be aware of, and you want to know what you're buying. So, and you can kind of adjust your bid in the auction accordingly. Like, say the colors might be a little faded, well, maybe you don't want to get up to the higher end of a fair value kind of thing. Okay, moving on though. Spine is the third category. Probably deserves, I think, its own category. The spine, you know, pretty important on books. You want to look on the front and the back. Pretty important, I think, to go from sellers that use scans. I think when when you see a 9.8 on a scan, you can get a really good idea of the spine condition because you're just trying to avoid like the obvious color breaking spine ticks that maybe the grader missed. Because yeah, 9.8s, they're allowed to have a little bit of micro spine tick that doesn't break the color. Essentially, like you're not really supposed to notice them when you hold up the book, but if you kind of get it to a light and look at it at the right angle, you'll probably see a couple spine ticks. But they shouldn't be color breaking. And yeah, it's just really important, I think, to buy from reputable sellers that use scans too. I think it is pretty important to really know what you're going to get. And yeah, for me on eBay, feedback does not lie. So, pretty much if the seller, like 100% feedback, 99.9% feedback, 99.8% feedback, okay. But anything lower than that, I just don't deal with anymore. Yeah, anything that's like a 98.7% feedback or something, I would not recommend to buy from those kind of sellers. A lot of times it's like something's going wrong and, on their end, and it's probably shipping, to be honest, like they just ship bad, or, they're cutting corners on shipping material, which, you just don't want to deal with that. So yeah, reputable sellers, nice scans, you'll be able to get a good idea of the spine conditioning. And yeah, you just do want to specifically look at the spine front and back on a 9.8 comic just to make sure. Next category is corners and edges. Yeah, my Hulk 340's got pretty impeccable cornering and edging. I'll go through like one of my kind of pet peeves on the cornering aspect is usually these top two corners, I like to just have them really crisp and sharp. There's just something that your eyes really go to those two top corners in a 9.8, and I like to have that initial like great eye appeal in a 9.8. So, maybe you can let that slide for like an 80s or a 70s book, whatever it may be, but I find that this really annoys me in the modern age. So, a book that had just come out in the last year or two, it's a 9.8 white pages, but like this corner or this corner looks kind of fuzzy. And, for me in the modern age, like books that have come out in the last 10 years or so or something like that, those are 9.6s. Like I don't think there's any kind of fuzziness on the corner where it doesn't have a good eye appeal. To me, that's a 9.6. It shouldn't be a 9.8. So yeah, keep an eye out on that kind of, I know that really bugs me on new modern age books. But yeah, ideally you want to just have like, those crisp corners and great edges on a great looking 9.8. So worth, yeah, and maybe arguably the corners and the edging a little bit more important on the cover. You do want to look on the back cover for anything kind of catastrophic that the grader may have missed, but I think having those crisp corners from the cover is something that I like in a 9.8, in a good high grade 9.8. Next one is a surface, and within this category, talking about does the book lay flat, or maybe it has wavy pages? Because yeah, you know what, I got a few 9.8s that do have kind of a nice natural wave, and I don't mind that. It probably just means they're not pressed, and it's just a super high grade book that's never been pressed, which I don't mind at all. It's still nice when a book just, a 9.8 lies really flat and has those like awesome white pages. And to be honest, in the my Hulk 340s, they're all very flat and great kind of glistening white pages. I got pretty lucky in that respect. And on the surface, yeah, I think a good idea of the surface condition, obviously you just want to take a moment and go over the surface back and front. But on the back cover, a lot of times you can get an idea of the surface damage a little bit better from the back cover. Along the spine, kind of on the back cover, maybe there's some blemishes. So that, that's just a thing to look out for. Another thing I wanted to make a point of, this old CBCS 9.8 cases, or CBCS cases, the old cases. I probably have about 5 or 6 of them in a 9.8. And maybe 2 or 3 of them have like odd, weird, wavy pages that probably are due to the old cases being really flimsy. I haven't bought CBCS 9.8s in a very long time. I would completely avoid the old cases because, yeah, I think they're just a little too flimsy and they lead to like, yeah, weird waves. And yeah, a few of my CBCS 9.8s look a little odd sitting in the slab. But since then, CBCS has a new case, so I think that was about a year and a half ago they came out with a new case. It's a lot better. I personally don't have one, but I've saw like reviews on the new CBCS case, and it's a lot better. But I would avoid the old CBCS 9.8s. This one, it's kind of tough to tell in some pictures, like does a book lie flat or not. But again, like it's pretty important if there's scans, you can just kind of tell a lot of these details. If you look at the surface, you can almost tell if it's just lying perfectly flat or maybe there's some weirdness going on. So again, pretty important to buy from reputable sellers that use scans most of the time, I would say. Okay, a last category is a slab condition. And Newton rings I would put as a part of this, and just general kind of scuffs and marks on the slabs. This one's got a little bit of Newton rings. Yeah, all the rest are pretty clean as far as Newton rings on my Hulk 340s. This kind of a minor amount of Newton rings, just in the sort of typical spot. For me, Newton rings, they don't bother me at all, really, unless I had, it was this was a long time ago, but a direct edition of Spawn #1 that just had Newton rings on every single part of it. It was just everywhere. So that would annoy me. I'd probably look to get a reslab in that kind of a situation. But when there's just a little bit in the middle, I don't even think about it. It has nothing to do with the condition of the comic book. Yeah, and as far as slabs, you know, just having a look at the slab, making sure there's no, you know, for me, I don't really care too much if maybe there's like a little scuff or scratch on the capsule from the encapsulation process. You can kind of tell like there are little scuffs and scratches occasionally on CGC cases that happen during the, you know, the encapsulation process at CGC. Just want to make sure there's no scratches, like, you know, obvious things that are super annoying. Make sure, you know, you look front and back, and just along the label too is where you can usually tell. Like sometimes there's little pieces of paper that get locked in here that can be a little bit annoying. Or just, you know, general scuffs and scratches along the label are generally more annoying than if, you know, you just had a little scuff down here or something like that. Yeah, normally I'm not too picky about like little scuffs and scratches. I'll, you know, and in some ways I'm like, if I can get a good deal on this, if the book looks great, like it has nothing to do with the condition of the book, like hopefully it might turn off a buyer or two and I can get it at a really good deal, just because there's like maybe the slightest scratch on the case. Doesn't really matter, especially if the book's looking great. But yeah, slab condition is absolutely just one of those boxes to tick when you're buying 9.8 comics. Because yeah, 9.8 comics, it's interesting because you know, a lot of these categories, colors and centering, like sometimes you'll come across a 9.4 that has like awesome colors and centering. You know, better than some of the 9.8s that I would have for sure. But you know, the spine ticks or whatever, they probably deserve that grade. Ideally, yeah, you want to put it all together, and sometimes you can find you know, a great 9.8 at a fair value that has great centering and almost a perfect wrap with great colors and an awesome spine with you know, sharp corners and you know, lies flat and no scuffs or scratches on the case. That's what you're kind of aiming for, but yeah, depending on how rare the book is, you can kind of, you know, give or take in a few of these categories. And, you know, I've done that over time, yeah, with, you know, some of the miswrappings where I like them on certain books. So, yeah, it'll be a personal preference for most people, but and most collectors. But, yeah, just knowing these categories and knowing what you're getting into. And because the worst thing is kind of when you buy a 9.8, you think it's perfect, basically, and then you get in and you're like, oh, the centering's kind of off, and you know, oh, there's this spine tick I didn't really notice, but now that I look at the pictures, yeah, it's there. So those are the kind of scenarios you want to avoid by just, you know, really being aware of these defects and differences. All right, team, yeah, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.